Another story about a suspicious character. There was a time when a seemingly eccentric woman frequented the park, petite in stature but with a rather large head and perpetually trembling hands. She wasn't overly disruptive. Sometimes she would just suddenly lash out at someone, yelling all sorts of nonsense about the undead and corpses. Or she'd stand in the middle of the road watching passers-by. Her gaze was quite eerie, pitch-black pupils, lids wide open, coupled with a wide grin, revealing a row of white and straight teeth. She resembled a witch, which is why she later became known as the Witch. Sometimes, the witch would hang animal paws from tree branches, and under various bushes, their entrails and bodies would be found. Bird corpses with their heads turned 180 degrees were discovered in the fountain. This began to seriously unsettle everyone, and gradually a commotion arose. It became even scarier when she tried to lead children away with her, enticing them with candies. There were a couple of instances where she nearly drowned them in the fountain. Thankfully, the children were rescued in time, and the woman ended up spending time behind bars twice. After the second incident, she was sent to a mental health facility, but somehow managed to escape from there. After that, the park became her haunt. No one knew where the witch hid. Some claimed to have seen her around abandoned residential buildings not far from the park. Sometimes I saw her in the park at night, but didn't see the point in calling anyone. She would come briefly, just for a few minutes, hang animal paws as usual, and hide their bodies in the bushes. She also started hanging clumps of her hair and defecating wherever she pleased. Her excrement could be found all over the park, even on dead animals. It got to the point where the witch started walking around the park with a butcher knife. Early in the morning, she would begin her stroll, glaring at and scaring every passerby. And when the paramedics and police showed up, she would flee in an unknown direction. This didn't last long. She suffered a heart attack on her way to the park. She was found not far from the abandoned residential buildings, having collapsed in such a way that she pierced her chest with the knife, stabbing her heart. After that woman, the park became a little quieter. It was summer, the beginning of June, a time for fun, beaches, and all the things so many people love about summer. Apart from the abandoned residential buildings, there was a school right next to the park. Like in other schools, there was a day camp where kids enthusiastically spent their holidays. Sometimes they organized games in the park, treasure hunts, bike races, marathon running, and all sorts of things. In the evenings, there were concerts, singing, showcasing various acts, simply playing melodies on the guitar, and telling jokes. They entertained themselves as best they could, and everyone was happy. And all this idyll was disrupted by one thing: the arrival of a group of children led by a strange tall woman at night in the park. These children looked sickly, skinny, pale, and very small. In their strange outfits, large light-colored trousers and oversized purple shirts, resembling gnomes. They also wore black autumn hats, some of which were almost covering their eyes, clearly not the right size for their small heads. Why they wore hats in the summer was unclear. The first time I saw them, I didn't immediately understand where they came from. They suddenly appeared in the camera's field of view, wandering around the park at night. A whole crowd of such kids, each with a partner, holding hands, all guided by some auntie who looked like a kindly fairy tale character. She dressed in a specific way, as if she were an aristocrat. Their movements were abrupt and somewhat mechanical, but the voice was very pleasant and melodic. Naturally, I decided to find out who they were and where they came from, but as soon as I approached, they would immediately run away, and the woman would shout at those moments, "The evil uncle has come, and he will kill us all. Take us to hell." I don't understand where such a reaction came from, so I closely watched that woman with the children. During their walks, they often drank something incomprehensible, just a mix of sounds, as if the children were still in infancy. I listened when they passed by the guardhouse, but still couldn't make out anything. Children's little heads flashed past the window. Some peeked at me. Someone even stared for a long time, examining me. They're big, dull eyes looked so curious. It seemed as though I was a curiosity to them. They chattered among themselves in their language, and I just watched, occasionally waving my hand. They didn't linger under the window for long. The ant would immediately drive them away, even trying to hit the window a few times. It didn't evoke anything but laughter from me. And so it went on for a while until the ant decided to show up in broad daylight. She, along with the children, tried to blend in with the crowds, offering to give one of the children to every passerby. She spouted nonsense about how the children came from some poor country where they were always hungry, where night ruled, bad people lived, and so on. An absurd tragic story that was supposed to bring tears, but instead repelled, because the way the woman did it, pulling the children by the hands and shouting, forcibly handing over the children, even almost undressing them, demonstrating them like objects. It got to the point where I had to intervene to restrain that woman. 2 men helped me catch her. She resisted, grabbing anything within reach and throwing it. She hit me in the forehead so hard that a big scar in the shape of a crooked smile remained. She almost poked one of the men's eyes out with a stick, but he caught it just in time. And now the creepy woman was lying on the grass, waiting for the police to arrive. In short, the thing was this: that woman had actually just stolen the children when they were still babies, right from their strollers, their mothers calling out. It was an old case of serial kidnapping that was never solved, as no one really saw the kidnapper's face properly back then. And now, several years later, the thief herself appeared, along with those children. She kept them in the basement of her house, feeding them bread and milk, washing them every 2 weeks, according to her words. The real children of the underground. She never told the reason for such a wild act. She just shook her head and remained silent, like a fish. Quite a creepy case, after which I took a long time to recover. There was a moment when the park turned into complete chaos with strange people in masks. They would come at any time, wearing horrifying costumes of ghosts, zombies, and other creatures, just wandering around the park. Sometimes they went too far, bothering passers-by, which led to chasing them away. Sometimes they even hung unrealistic props resembling gallows on tree branches. At night, they would sometimes gather near the fountain, dancing to strange music like demons, throwing mud, laughing loudly, and even engaging in orgies. There was a moment when they almost dragged me into their revelry, but when I tried to drive them away, it took rough force to resolve everything, including breaking one of their arms, after which they all scattered. The guy whose arm I broke seemed like he was in another world. I tried to help him, but he just laughed, looked at me with a hazy gaze, and talked about eternal pleasure. There was a sickly sweet smell coming from him, and I noticed strange cuts and punctures on his hands. I immediately realized he was a sect member addicted to drugs. The next morning, it became clear why I had to report to the police. The hunt for them began, but they became more cunning. They started coming to the park armed. They brought various weapons, sticks with nails, rocks, scissors, even hammers. Anyone who dared approach them would immediately be hit with something heavy or sharp. When a police car arrived with sirens, they would attack the officers. Many suffered at the hands of these sect members, and a couple of people were even killed. One fine day, the park was besieged. These demons terrorized everyone, openly engaged in sex, and mutilated themselves. The boldest among them performed harakiri and played with their intestines until their last breath. They set themselves on fire, killed each other, and when the riot police arrived, the sect members threw themselves at their feet, begging to be crushed. The park became the most horrific place resembling Sodom, with bodies everywhere, blood pools seeping into pathways and lawns. The air reeked of death. The park had to be closed for a while to clean up and sort everything out. This incident will always remain in the minds of many. After that day, nothing more horrifying happened.